prosecution, which essentially says that if somebody hands over or delivers a drug to somebody and it doesn't require a sale, that is distribution, essentially. So that seems to be one of the sticking points here. That was something that they were clearly parsing through.
Whether they will provide a modified Allen charge. This is basically where the judge will tell the jury, keep on deliberating, keep moving forward, and then if they come to an impasse, if at some point they say, we just cannot come to a decision, that's when we are dealing with a hung count as to respect to that count and possibly a partial verdict. In fact, prosecutor Maureen Comey says, we are preparing a modified Allen charge. Sean Combs' defense counsel, Mark Agnifilo, says, we propose you tell them to continue deliberating and that you not take the partial verdict. No modified Allen charge. The judge said, with the defense request, I bring the jury out to say that. Agnifilo says, yes. The judge says, okay, email your proposals, each side, I'll wait. I could give a modified Allen charge, or at some point, I could tell them that they could return a partial verdict. Email me, I'll wait. This is again.
Do we want a partial verdict?
And I will let you also know that at 4:54 p.m., Intercity Press indicated that in the well of the courtroom, everyone but Donaldson, Xavier Donaldson, one of Sean Combs' defense attorneys, is in their seat waiting. Sean Combs is leaning back. His legs are crossed. He does not look happy. I want to talk about this right now. We're going to bring in your questions.
Puffy don't look happy.
Right now, we're going to be on air till we figure out what's going on. I want to bring on trial attorney Adante Pointer. I want to bring on criminal defense attorney Bradford Cohen. And I want to bring on criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Safa Robinson Ferrer. We're also working on getting a Sierra Gillespie up as well. It's great to have everybody here. I think we're still working on getting Bradford. Guys, so happy to have you here. This is my take, okay? This is my take. You tell me if I'm wrong. Safa, I'll start with you. I think the jury has found him guilty of both of the Mann Act violations, so both transportation to engage in prostitution. I believe they have also found him guilty with respect to sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura Fine. I think they have found him not guilty with respect to sex trafficking of Jane, and here's why. There is no way that you are going to have jurors who are potentially able to vote guilty of racketeering and would acquit him of everything else that he's facing. I don't see that working. I don't see that making sense. Now, what happened today? They kept asking readbacks of testimony with respect to Cassie, whether it was the 2016 tape, whether it was Jane, whether it was the canned flight where Combs was allegedly showing her freak-off tapes. There was no and that was also the part about Daniel Phillip potentially witnessing Sean Combs abusing her, this sex worker, this male performer. There was no request for a readback of Jane's testimony. I feel confident in this prediction. Safa, am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong at all, Jesse. I actually would agree with you. I think that the prosecution's strongest case was on the transportation to engage in prostitution, and that would have been and would be the easiest thing to come back with a guilty verdict on. I think that with regard to the sex trafficking, with respect to Jane Doe and her testimony, I think there were some issues of credibility, and I think that the way she testified seemed to indicate things other than sex trafficking, including her own consent and participation in the relationship with Mr. Combs, the certain benefits that she obtained, and certain jealousy and things like that. So I think they're going to come back not guilty on that. With respect to Cassie Ventura, I think, and based on the questions that the jury has asked, we can probably expect a guilty verdict with respect to the sex trafficking on that count with her. Again, we have to look at whether there's the use of threats, physical force, fraud, or coercion. That seems to be the case here, whether it's through the hotel video, through coercion and showing her this video on the flight and ultimately getting a freak off after that. So I think you're right about all of your predictions, Jesse. With respect to the RICO count, it's questionable there. It seems that they've had mixed feelings on that, and we'll see what the judge does, if he takes a partial verdict or gives them the Allen to come back with their finish.
We have a court update. The judge says, I have received each side's proposal. Mr. Agnifilo, your proposal, there's not much there. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo says, we are not remotely at the place where the jury needs more to deliberate efficiently. They are remarkably efficient. They already have 4 verdicts. The judge says, I wouldn't call the government's proposal an Allen charge. It reminds the jury of the instruction I previously gave on the duty to deliberate. I could simply recite from the jury charge. I know we also have Bradford Cohen with us as well, so we're going to add him to the conversation. Bradford, good to see you. My prediction, in case you didn't hear, is I think they found him guilty of the Mann Act violations. I think they found him guilty of sex trafficking of Jane. I think they probably found him not guilty with respect to the sex trafficking of Jane, and obviously they appear to be hung with the jury. Your prediction, and also it seems to me that what they're saying here, the defense doesn't want them to go back, right? The defense doesn't want them to go back and continue deliberating on racketeering, because obviously there's a chance they could come back and find him guilty of the top charge, which carries life in prison. Am I understanding this correctly? And what's your prediction?
You know, I heard your prediction. I think that you are usually right. In this one, I think that you're not.
Okay.
I'm thinking, I think there's going to be a guilty verdict. I think it's going to be on the Mann Act. I think my opinion is they were having a big debate over Cassie's testimony and Cassie and whether or not she was sex trafficked. I think ultimately, my guess is the sex traffickings are going to be not guilties. I think he's going to be guilty of the Mann Acts. I've said that from the beginning. I could be wrong, and you could be right, and then, I'll owe you a dinner. But I honestly can't see, after the testimony, I do think Cassie was a better witness, obviously, than Jane. But I still can't see the trafficking charge. I've tried many, many times to give an analysis here and look at the testimony, look at the text between them, look at how she was acting, how long the relationship was. It's a very difficult one to come back to.
Let me just push you back on this, and then I want to get to Adante. They asked for the readbacks of what I would argue were specific examples of potential sex trafficking. The 2016 incident, the Daniel Phillip incident, the plane incident, and then relatively shortly after, they say they have a verdict. If they were, it seems to me, if they came back tomorrow and said we had a verdict, I would say maybe you're right, maybe not guilty. But so soon after that, it feels to me they were convinced that that's sex trafficking of Cassie.
You could be correct. I see the rest of the guests are shaking their head yes. I guess I'm the lone man in the box of saying that you're not correct. I do agree. Listen, the readbacks and then immediate verdict after the readbacks or soon thereafter is never a good sign. I always say that. But in this case, I don't know if there was one person who was saying, hey, listen, I need to hear this. I need to go over it again before I vote. And that was the individual that was holding out for guilt. I don't know. You could be right. But I have a feeling the Mann Acts are the easiest low-hanging fruit. And I think they are not happy with the government. Everyone that I've spoken to that was actually in the courtroom, just the disdain on their faces while the government was speaking, especially when Comey was speaking, I just don't know if they are big fans of the government and they can really apply the facts of the case to the elements of the case and say, yes, this is sex trafficking. It's just such an unusual sex trafficking case that you would normally see in federal court.
Adante, now I can get your opinion about this. And by the way, I need you to answer questions. We have questions coming in from our viewers. We have a question from State of Confusion. Okay, great name for this case, but State of Confusion asks, what is a partial verdict? So, Adante, what is a partial verdict, and what do you think this partial verdict could be?
Well, here in this situation, a partial verdict is what the jury has essentially announced, which is they have a unanimous decision on 4 of the 5 counts, and that one of the counts they're unable to reach a unanimous verdict at this time. So you have a partial verdict. It's not a clean slate one way or the other, and so there remains one count at this point that's still unresolved, of which the judge has to decide whether or not he'll take the essentially hung jury on that one charge, or he'll ask them to go back, and that's what it sounds like the judge is going to do, to ask them to continue to deliberate. In terms of the way this is going to play out, it's the way I've thought all along as it relates to Cassie was really the strongest witness, the one that was most persuasive from what I could gather from the testimony that was given, and just she had the videos which we had seen, and all these different other elements that kind of corroborated her story. The other two young women, they had issues of credibility, in my opinion, and so the accounts that go to Cassie, I think those are the ones that Diddy goes down on. One for Jane and the other type of ancillary accounts, ancillary charges, if you will, associated with the other witnesses, I think Diddy may have the possibility of walking on. But I wouldn't bet on it right now, given that the jury did, as you said, asked for readbacks of particular testimony from particular witnesses, and then announced that they have verdicts on 4 or 5 counts. That tends to mean that they've resolved those difficult
The family is there.
and arrived, as we know, at a unanimous verdict. So I think that's what we're going to see right here.
Yeah, and just to reemphasize my point before, I cannot see a world where you have potential jurors who are planning to vote guilty on racketeering conspiracy, because that's what we're having right now, right? There's a debate. There's a split. They can't be on the same page. There are jurors who want to convict him of racketeering conspiracy. I cannot see a situation where you have those jurors who would vote guilty on racketeering and not guilty of everything else, or at least with respect to transportation to engage in prostitution.
Right.
This is just my perspective. Now, have an update from court.
Hi, darling.
Mark Agnifilo, Sean Combs' defense attorney, says, we're not at that point yet. I'm not saying we wouldn't be at the point on Thursday, July 3rd, or Monday. Let's wait and see. I'm putting stock in that they have reached verdicts on 4 counts. The judge says, I'm going with that, but I may give more later. The judge says, I could tell them that they could return on July 3rd. We could arrange that. What do the parties think? Prosecutor Maureen Comey says, we'd like to give them the option to deliberate on the 3rd. This is something that we were talking about as well, because in the Southern District of New York, that is a court holiday.
Yeah, they may be just trying to rush.
Agnifilo says, 1 second, Your Honor. Judge says yes. Agnifilo comes back. Our preference is that you don't tell them now about Thursday. The downside is that the jurors might feel rushed to reach a verdict to avoid the Thursday issue. Let them deliberate tomorrow. You could ask at the end of tomorrow. The judge says, so the defense would have no objection to them deliberating on July 3rd.
Defense ain't ready to give it up.
Says no objection if they want to. Judge says, okay, let's bring out our jury. Now, that is really interesting, Safa. I have to agree with the defense there, right? Don't tell them they have the option or that they're debating whether to come back on Thursday. Why even bring that up now? Just let them continue to deliberate. That was a good point by the defense, right?
Yes, it definitely was. And I think what the defense is essentially trying to do here is give them as much time as they need to deliberate. You don't want them to rush and say, well, fine, we've got to reach a verdict. And then it backfires because they come back on a guilty verdict on the top count. So very favorable, at least, from the defense aspect, wanting to slow it down, giving them the time. And then maybe they might also change their opinion on some other things, and we don't know. It seems like they've come to a unanimous verdict on the other counts 2 through 5. But yes, most definitely.
The jury has entered the courtroom.
So ooh.
Next. Okay, Bradford, over to you. Got questions coming in. LaRob Show asks, quick question.
Ooh, come on, Tisa. I need,
verdict tonight in the Diddy trial, or could count 1 be pushed to tomorrow? I mean, if they go back tonight, chances they come back with a verdict?
How close are they? How close are they to?
Bradford, I think we're working on.
Oh my God.
I think you muted yourself, Bradford. We got you back. Can you?
Hot Nightbot. Nightbot.
Bradford,
I got you.
Gotcha. So if they go back, chances they'll come back with a verdict on
Nightbot.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, I hate night verdicts. So anytime that a jury is kept overnight, anytime a jury is
what is
rushed,
a night
they want to
bot?
go home, go to sleep, and the judges keep deliberating. It's the worst. So my preference would be exactly what the defense did, is say, hey, let's slow it down here. Let's see what happens tomorrow. Bring them back in. It's 5:18. Send them home for the night. Let them think about it. It could be, yeah.
How close are they?
One guy comes in and says, you know what? I was thinking about count 3. I don't know if I can do it anymore. but that usually doesn't happen. It seems like they've reached verdicts on those 4, and that one count is going to be the one that they decide. I don't think it's going to be decided tonight because I think they're going to go home, and I don't think
They
this
didn't
is the type
say.
of judge, and I've
They
been in
just
front
say
of
they're
judges that'll
unanimous
say, let's go to 10
on
o'clock, 11
everything
o'clock.
except
This is not that
racketeering.
judge. So I don't believe there's going to be any kind of verdict on that count tonight, and I think tomorrow
wow.
they're going to go back, they'll start fresh, and they'll see if they can reach something tomorrow. But I think it's going to be difficult.
Diddy not happy.
People have dug their heels in, and when individuals start digging their heels in, and there's more than one,
So he really want
when
them.
there's one, all the rest just beat up.
He don't want no hung jury though on racketeering. He don't want to have to do that with Nova. I know Star Dilemma.
Eyes are on that
Oh my
federal
God.
courtroom in downtown New York. We have a ton of people watching us right now on the live stream. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Thank you so much for continuing to come to us on Law and Crime as we cover this in real time. And by the way, there is an update.
Come on.
The judge says, speaking to the jury, I asked you to return to the jury room. If you decide you're done for the day, send me another note and I'll bring you back out to end the day. The jurors leave. Judge says everyone can go back to doing what they were doing. We may get a note in like 10 minutes from the jury. We're going home. We'll decide on racketeering tomorrow if we decide. Let me bring in Law and Crime's Sierra Gillespie, who is outside that courthouse right now. Sierra, great to see you. What is the scene like outside? News of a potential verdict. We were wondering.
Yeah, because the mama came in and the family started coming.
We were one of the first. We already happened to be live on air and announced 2 through 5. There was a verdict reached and questionable about count number 1. So we're on air as this is happening. All of a sudden, a crowd is forming behind me at the courthouse here. I don't know how well you can see. Also, let me note that it is raining. For a time, it was pouring down rain. There's so many umbrellas, people getting hit, water falling all over people. The scene is chaos. I will say it's not as big as I initially would have thought, simply because, first of all, it was so hot out today. Then it started to pour rain, and I don't know if people were really excited about the prospect of standing in pouring rain. However, we have seen a crowd gathering outside of the courthouse. Mics are set up in the event of any sort of press conference. There were people shouting. There were people who are opposed to Diddy, people who are for Diddy. I mean, there is definitely a crowd here, and you can feel it in the air. When there's a verdict, you can almost just feel it.
So, first of all, to echo what you were saying, I just got word. We are the #1 Diddy trial coverage live stream that's happening right now.
Way to go, Law Crime.
Incredible. Again, we have the best viewers. Thank you so much. This is a super chat question that came in from Melissa A. Sierra. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to throw it to you too. So first of all, Melissa A., thank you so much for this great question. How can they have a verdict on counts 2 through 5, but not on 1? That's confusing. Please explain. This is my take, okay? Each one of these charges is separate consideration. They each have their own elements. They could easily say, okay, Sean Combs, I think he transported men and Jane and Cassie across the lines for the purposes of sex work. Okay? That's transportation to engage in prostitution. You don't need.
He sent them back in to
sex trafficking.
Continue deliberating. But if they come out and say they can't reach it tonight, come back tomorrow.
He used those methods to induce her on multiple locations to engage in freak-offs. Maybe Jane, not necessarily so much. These are separate determinations. Racketeering conspiracy is multiple elements. Yes, there are underlying crimes for racketeering conspiracy that include sex trafficking, that include transportation to engage in prostitution. And yes, as we talk about underlying predicate crimes, the jury could say, I think Diddy engaged in sex trafficking. I think he engaged in transportation to engage in prostitution. I think the prosecution has proven at least 2 underlying crimes. But what we have to remember is there is another part of racketeering conspiracy that may be causing them a holdup. Was Sean Combs the leader of a criminal organization, a criminal enterprise? Was there a criminal enterprise? Was there a conspiracy? Was there a criminal agreement to further a pattern of illegal activity? Were the assistants, were the bodyguards, was everybody knowing what was going on? Was there a common purpose? I'm not surprised, Sierra. I'm not surprised if they're have come to a decision on 2 and 5, and they're hung up on racketeering because that's its whole separate animal, right?
I couldn't agree with you more, Jesse. I mean, I guess I understand why some people may be confused. He's on trial. Is it either guilty or not guilty or a hung jury? But we've seen this even most recently in the Harvey Weinstein case.
Right.
You know, we saw that there was a hung jury. It's a mixed verdict or a split verdict, what we call it. When there are multiple charges, you can be found not guilty of one, guilty of another, hung on another. That is something that is completely possible. It is confusing, though. And to me, I understand it. To your point, Jesse, they probably went through on the verdict forms and we're looking, okay, he's charged with, you know, racketeering conspiracy. Perhaps we'll wait until the end to go back to that one because there's a lot to go through. What about transportation to engage in prostitution? Counts 2 through 5. They probably went through all of those, were able to agree a bit easier. And then to everything you just said, it's the racketeering conspiracy that is the most intense. It's the most confusing, especially when you bring in the predicate crimes, when we're talking about bribery or witness tampering or arson, forced labor. There are a multitude of them. We actually read out the verdict form here in the live stream recently because there are multiple different things to consider. So not only do they have to weigh the weeks upon weeks of testimony and evidence and going through and saying, okay, did the government prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? It makes sense to me that there's a disagreement here simply because it's very confusing. And exactly to what you were saying, this is a common question, by the way, that a lot of our law and crime viewers have come to us and asked about the fact that Diddy, Sean Combs is the defendant here, and there are no co-defendants. There are no alleged co-conspirators of this racketeering conspiracy, which generally has multiple co-conspirators. I mean, there may have been some, but they're not listed as co-defendants. So is that confusing for jurors? And perhaps maybe that's actually what it is. But I agree with you, Jesse. I'm not surprised that this is the one that everyone's really hung up on.
Yeah, and by the way, the jury has officially gone home for the night. So the judge says we've received a note that the jurors have concluded for today. We'll resume tomorrow. We'll bring them back out. Judge says all rise. Very briefly, thank you. Tomorrow, go directly into the jury room. Keep an open mind. Do not watch or read about this case. We'll see each other tomorrow. All rise. Judge asks the attorneys anything. No, no. Not surprised by that. Sierra, stand by. Want to get a reaction to this from the rest of the panel. I'll go to you, Adante. We have a super chat question that came in from M3 Voodoo. Love the show, Jesse. Thank you so much. What are the chances and ramifications if the split on count 1 is 11-1, with the holdout being the problem juror?
Ooh!
Remember, they talked about the juror's first note was, I believe it was juror 25.
Right. He could not follow the rules.
Following the jury instructions.
Oh, that's very fair.
Yeah, sure. If once the jury comes back and it's polled, okay, which means they'll say what.
That's a mistrial. That will be a mistrial if it's him.
If it comes out to 11-1 for the prosecution, best believe the prosecution will try that charge again.
Absolutely.
And you'll see P. Diddy up on trial again for that. Maybe cut a deal at this late stage, given what he's facing. But I think more likely you'll see another trial. So that's what'll happen. Why? Because the prosecution will be emboldened. They'll say, look, the problem child is the one that kept us from getting a clean sweep if he is convicted on the other 4 charges. And so they'll retry it again. Now, if it's the other way, 11-1 for acquittal, and by chance that holdout is someone who's for the prosecution, which I think is unlikely given they were able to reach unanimous verdicts on the other four charges, then the prosecution may abandon that prosecuting that charge. But I think what's more likely, if it is 11-1 and the problem child is the holdout that kept the prosecution from getting a clean sweep, you'll see a RICO trial again in Manhattan.
Really? Really? You believe that? They would go through this all for that charge?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. You know, I mean, look, they went to
They should have replaced that. You should have replaced him.
A lot of the receipts. We had all these different people coming in for that particular charge. So I think the government really wants that.
Adante, I know you have to run. I know you have to catch a flight. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Good seeing you, my friend. All right, Bradford, go to you now. Got a question from Corey Fifield. Can the jury members change their mind on one of the counts they decided about? Can they, when they come back tomorrow?
They've already
or
reached
the
it.
verdicts for counts 2 to 5 locked in?
question. They're not locked. Anybody can change their minds until it's, until the fat lady sings. Once it's read in court and it's officially signed by the foreman and handed to the judge, that's when they can't, well, even then they could say, hey, that's not my verdict, and something could happen after that. But generally that doesn't happen. But yes, anytime before then, they could just say like, hey, listen, I've decided, I thought about it yesterday. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going guilty. I want to go not guilty, or the other way around. Any day of the week that could happen. And by the way, I just want to comment on one thing. I think if it is a hung jury on the RICO charge, the likelihood that he gets recharged and redone, or a new trial on the RICO charge, I think is slim to none. I don't think they want any more dealings with Diddy. I don't think that this group of prosecutors are going to be there after this. I think that they are all going to move on to greener pastures, and I think this is something that they are going to put into the past. I think if there's a hung charge, I don't see it being retried unless there is some kind of Uno reverso card and he gets some sort of pardon or commutation from the government, from this administration. I don't see them recharging that count.
Well, you just answered the question from JRiz87, super chat question. Thank you so much. Do you think P. Diddy will get a retrial if he gets a hung jury? Asafa, what do you think?
I don't think that they're going to want to spend the government resources to put this trial on again. But it depends. It's up to the government to make that decision, but they would have to call in all of these witnesses, essentially, quote unquote, re-victimize some of these individuals who, may be in a sensitive state. We know Ms. Ventura was in the process of getting ready to have a baby. When the trial would be scheduled, are they going to call this expert again? There's so many moving parts to putting a trial together that is a big decision. And also the resources that it would take and the time that it would take. And getting a jury again on a case like this after this has been so publicized throughout the world. So I don't know that they're going to try to go for it again. I would caution on the side that they would not.
Safa, let me just throw a follow-up question to you. This is from Francisca. Jesse, what do you think? Do you think the other counts are guilty or not guilty? And do you think Diddy will serve any time in jail? So let me just reiterate what I think. And then Safa, tell me if he's convicted of sex trafficking and he's convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, what could potential prison time look like? Let's put that on pause. Again, let me just reiterate to Francisca. Based on what I've seen from today and during the deliberations and this note, I believe that they have found him guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. I think that they found him also guilty with respect to sex trafficking of Cassie, particularly because of the notes today that were about concrete, specific examples of sex trafficking, and they came back with a verdict on that relatively quickly. I also feel that they found him not guilty with respect to sex trafficking of Jane, partially because they didn't have any questions, any readback of testimony with respect to Jane. That is suspect, to say the least. So, let me ask you this. Again, Safa, do you think Diddy will serve any time in jail if he's convicted of sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution? What could he be looking at?
I think he's definitely going to serve some time in jail. And he's already in custody right now. So all of the time that he has spent in custody is counting towards any sentence that he ultimately might be sentenced to by this particular judge. He's looking at, if he's only convicted of those counts and not of the RICO, of up to 15 years. And so in terms of sentencing, there are going to be a number of factors that go into what his exact sentence will be. The judge can take a number of things into consideration, including, some of the other allegations that were heard or information that he gained from sitting through this trial. Not only that, but there's going to be a pre-sentence investigation that digs into his life and things of that nature that will help guide the judge into what his sentence is going to be. You're also going to have Mr. Combs' attorneys putting together a mitigation package, which essentially would humanize Mr. Combs to the judge to say, give him the most lenient sentence possible, judge, for these reasons. The government, of course, we can expect is going to come in and ask for the maximum, especially if they lose on that RICO charge.
By the way, I said that we have incredible viewers. Listen to this. This is from Miss On Average. Watch every single day of the 33 days from Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks, Jesse and the team. Unbelievable, people across the board. I want to get Sierra Gillespie in, so I know we're working on getting her up as soon as we can. I'll jump in, and also we might be trying to get Elizabeth Milner up as well, trying to get everybody up to talk about this. But Bradford, I'll start with you. This is a question from Afri Coco Lux. Just so we are clear, he can still go to jail even if they are hung on one count.
I mean, if they're guilty on another count, yes. I mean, if it's all not guilty and hung, no, he's not going to jail. And here's what's interesting about if they're hung on the RICO charge. What's so very interesting
RICO,
is
the
you're going to
record.
find him guilty of a sex trafficking concerning Cassie. Those predicate crimes, aren't they much easier to prove at that point? I mean, if you're saying, hey, yeah, he's guilty on sex trafficking with Cassie, to your point, which you were discussing, that you think that he might be guilty on the sex trafficking with Cassie, I think it would be a lot easier to get that RICO charge and get a guilty on the RICO charge. That's why I'm leaning towards the not guilty. That's my reasoning behind it. Because if you're saying, yeah, he sex trafficked her, he did all these things, he distributed pills because, she said that he handed me pills and he handed me drugs, it's easier to get to that guilty on RICO than a split on the RICO and a guilty on the trafficking, unless they're just splitting the baby. To me, this is a very unique way that the jury has been looking at the case. And like I said before, I loved Mark's closing, where he was saying, no one came forward. This is the government looking for the crime and finding the guy. This isn't all of a sudden a victim came forward and then they're like, let's investigate this. That's not how this went. And it could be anyone. It could be you. It could be you. It could be you. I love this closing. I thought he did an excellent job. No matter what the outcome is here, I think the defense did a very, very nice job with what they had and what they had to work with. And I'll be interested to see how this all shakes out because of all the guessing, right? We all sit here, we all guess, but at the end of the day, we all could be wrong. So
Yeah,
we'll see how this all
100%.
shakes out.
100% could all be wrong. I will tell you, no, I think the defense did a phenomenal job. I think they did such a phenomenal job that I don't blame them for not really putting on any witnesses. I don't even recall. Let me bring in Sierra Gillespie and tell me if I'm wrong. Sierra, good to see you again. Let me ask you this. Do you even recall the prosecution mentioning Brianna Bungolan in their closing argument? She was arguably one of the most problematic witnesses for the prosecution. The woman who claims that Sean Combs dangled her off a 17-story balcony, but, on cross-examination, they hit her with digital evidence to suggest that the alleged attack didn't happen when she said. Problematic, inconsistent information, inconsistent statements. I think they did a phenomenal job. I don't remember them even the prosecution even highlighting Brianna Bungolan in their closing. Maybe because the defense did such a good job. Am I wrong or right? What do you remember?
Jesse, when you were talking about that, I kind of went back in my memory bank as if I'm a juror, kind of trying to remember. And no, I don't recall them bringing her up at all during the closings, which is interesting. I mean, they talked about the inconsistencies there with the date of everything, because remember, there was the photo that had a different date. There was kind of discrepancy in all of that. And I think, whoa, again, just to remind you, we're live here in the Southern District of Manhattan, where things are getting kind of crazy because we got a partial verdict. I don't recall, but that just woke me up into next week. So I'm sending it back to you, Jesse. What's the next question?
Yeah. That is somebody who, either didn't, has an opinion on Diddy. They wanted to be known. No, okay, so first of all, we have people coming in right now. We have a lot of viewers coming in. I want to update about what's going on. The jury sent out a note at 4:05 p.m. saying they have reached a verdict with respect to 4 of the 5 counts. Sex trafficking of Cassie, sex trafficking of Jane, and the Mann Act violations. So transportation to engage in prostitution, 1 with respect to Cassie, 1 with respect to Jane. They indicated they are hung right now. They cannot come to a decision with respect to the top charge, count 1, racketeering conspiracy. The judge brought them back in, told them to continue deliberating. They came back, said, we'd like to go home for the day. They were sent home for the day. They will continue deliberating. So as of right now, unless something should change tomorrow, we may have a partial verdict. We may have a verdict as to 4 of the 5 charges. I have given my predictions. All of my panelists have given their predictions about what this means. So far, nobody we have spoken to has said that he's going to be acquitted of everything else. I look, but Bradford said it best. We could all be wrong. We have no idea. I mean, I'm reading the tea leaves, reading what's been going on. I gave my 2 cents about what I think it is. Again, I think that he might be convicted of the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, sex trafficking of Cassie, probably not guilty of Jane. Sierra, but I'm going back to you on this because we have so many different questions about this. The readback of testimony today, when the jury asked about the 2016 incident, the LA Continental Hotel incident, when they asked about the Cannes Film Festival, the flight, right? I think that was a crucial point. When they asked about Daniel Phillips' testimony, this male performer, why is that significant? For our viewers who don't know, why are those 3 incidents so significant?
I think they're so important because it kind of tells us what we now know a bit more about, right? The fact that there is this question mark for count number 1, the racketeering conspiracy. We now know, okay, they couldn't decide. There's kind of a split right there, a hung jury at the moment about that one. It sounds like we'll see what happens more tomorrow. But earlier in the day, before we heard anything about these potential verdicts for the rest of everything, we had this question. Hey, can we have the transcripts with Cassie's testimony, with the testimony from Daniel Phillips? And now we kind of know that this goes back to count 1, the racketeering conspiracy, the RICO. And I think it just goes to show once again how confusing all of the predicate crimes could be. We've talked about these ad nauseum simply because they're so confusing and there's so much to go through here. And it seems to me that the jurors were trying to do that, parse through and say, okay, did this have to go to forced labor? Did this have to go to arson? I mean, what was it as far as all of the predicate crimes? And specifically with those incidents, we're talking about the Intercontinental Hotel, we're talking about the Cannes Film Festival, the domestic violence situations that are going on there, very apparent, number 1. And then number 2, when we're talking about Daniel Phillips' testimony, that could be going toward sex trafficking, because of course his testimony is really important in regards to the alleged sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. So I think it's really important. It shows kind of what direction the jury is going, at least in all of that. But who's to say? I mean, they're not agreeing on things as of right now about count number 1, which is really stunning.
Yep. Sierra, I know you have to sign off. Great reporting all day. Great hosting all day. Lucky to have you. Thank you so much. Hopefully nobody else hunks as you're walking away. Who's going to honk Sierra Gillespie? Come on. We live in a society, people. This is a place of adults. Please. I know. All right, Sierra.
Thank you so much, Jesse. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. All right, by the way, we're working on getting Elizabeth Milner up.
James Holmes had to get up and walk out the courtroom. It looked like she was going to pass out. A family member jumped up and ran after her. Xavier went after her, and one of the family men went after her, okay? She didn't have an outburst, but she literally looked like she was using all her strength to walk out the courtroom and take a minute away from prying eyes. Again, Christian Combs came in. He had his head hung down in between his hands. His brothers were rubbing his chest. This does not look like a family that thought that they beat those charges on the 4 out of the 5. And let me tell y'all something, right? Even if the RICO is hung, even if they find there is no RICO, even if they find there's no RICO, guess what? It doesn't matter, because each of those offenses have a minimum of 10 or 20 years, and that's on the low end. I'm just swiping my screen, showing you guys respect. Even if, right, even if they find that he is only guilty of those 4 charges and not of the RICO, that is looking at one charge is 10 years, another charge is 15 years, another charge is 20, another charge is 20. That is, right? That is, you are looking at about 80 years in prison if you run it consecutively. Now listen, they said they decided. We do not know if it's all guilty all the time, but I'll tell you one thing. The prediction we had that Diddy is 100% doing jail time is going to happen. There will be justice.
Yeah, he's going to prison.
Now, how much justice? We will have to see, but there will be justice. What else? Diddy was just sitting there. He had his hands folded, and he was just looking down at his hands. This did not look like a man that thought that he got a not guilty thing, okay? He was sitting there. Let me not look into the thing. I think that's illegal to look into the mirrors of the windows of the thing. He was sitting there, right? And he was looking, and this did not look like a man that thought he had the winning ticket. The prosecution did. On top of that, Mark Agnifilio. So listen, and I feel for Diddy, because this is what got me, right? They literally were like, okay, the jury actually said, and I quote, hold on. They said, oh, more body language. Quincy looked sad. The girls looked like they were about to cry. I really felt sorry for them. And in that minute, I'm like, this is so sad. And then I said, wait a second. Because at the end of the day, the only person that caused this, the only person behind this was Diddy. Not the people demanding justice, not the people saying you can't use people's party favors, not the people that said, you know, all these key stories about putting roofies in champagne and giving girls a special champagne. This is illegal. That is great. It's illegal, right? Mark Agnifilio saying they used the oldest defense in the book. He raped me. Mark, well, how about Diddy's about to get the oldest case in the book? You are guilty. So again, what ended up happening, right? Oh, also, the jury, when they walked out, usually when the jury walks in and out, I'm not saying they're smiling at Diddy. They would never do anything in that proper, but they seem just like loo, right? Walking and walking out. When they were invited in, because they said that the jury is deadlocked and they cannot decide about what to do with the verdict, the jury came walking in, and they were walking in like, they were walking in looking guilty as a mug. They were walking in looking like people that knew that they just sentenced a man to jail, that he might actually die there. Again, maybe I'm reading too much into the body language, but the jury looked very, very, very guilty. On top of that, there was one juror that in my mind, has seemed very not, hey, how are you? Yeah, go ahead, sorry. There was one juror that in my mind, I thought looked very, very pro-Diddy. I always thought I'm not going to say who they are, but they were always very pro-Diddy. This time they came in, and they came in looking angry but sad at the same time. They came in like this, almost looking like they wanted to cry, almost looking like they had no choice, almost looking like they tried their best to roll out for somebody that they may have thought was innocent, but at the end of the day, they had to decide what the law is. Now, there is a chance that they already said Diddy is not guilty for 4 of the 5 charges, but judging by the way they all walked out, they had solemn expressions. They looked guilty. They would not look even in the defense's direction. They only went and they sat down, and they actually looked sad. That does not look like people that are going to send somebody home. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Right? This is crazy. So anyway, let me get into what happened. You guys, oh, also, let me read you this, right? Because I was talking to, have a good one. I was talking to one of my friends, and they had some legal, and they had some interesting thoughts on this. I wanted to read it to you. You guys, it looks like Sean Diddy Combs is going to jail, possibly for the rest of his life. And judging by the way the Combs family, the defense, and Diddy himself and the jury was acting, that 4 out of 5 counts, they already decided it's not a good thing. It is not a good thing. Now, the judge did ask, all right, you guys, what are we going to do, right? The jury said that both sides cannot decide on the predicate acts. The predicate acts are the underlying acts. Remember we talked about that? RICO is the case. The predicate criminal acts are the eggs, the flour, the baking soda, the sugar. Without that, you cannot have a RICO. Now here's the thing. You must find that they committed some of these underlying criminal acts that are committed under the RICO. However, when you decide that, it must be unanimous. So if I say, yeah, that motherfucker did bribery, but I don't think he did trafficking, and another person says, well, I think he did trafficking, but I don't think he did arson. You see what I'm saying? All 12 people have to agree he did arson, he did sex trafficking, he did robbery. Now, here's the interesting thing, which makes me a little nervous. Again, judging by their body language, they look guilty. Judging by the body language, it looks like they convicted guilty on at least some things. But think about it. Those counts are, let me pull up these documents for you to see 4 of the 5 counts. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's get into this, because this is the only thing, right, that actually makes me feel very, very, a little bit worried. Not much, judging by their body language, but just a little bit. Let's look at the verdict, the official blank sheet verdict, right? If you find the defendant guilty of count 1 RICO, what type of racketeering acts do you unanimously find were involved in the offense? acts involving kidnapping. This is what they couldn't decide on. Acts involving arson, acts involving bribery, acts involving witness tampering, acts involving forced labor, acts involving, sorry guys, I'm fighting with the wind, acts involving sex trafficking, and acts involving transportation for purposes of prostitution, and acts involving drug distribution, okay? Now, okay, so that is for the RICO, okay? And they said that the pattern,
Hey,
and then they
Dante,
said,
Keisha, and
if and only
Purple
if you found him guilty of count 1, did the pattern of racketeering activity include SMEX trafficking of Cassandra Ventura? And did it include SMEX trafficking of Jane? So, what does that mean? The 8 things were RICO. The other 2 things about, do you think they committed SMEX trafficking for Jane and for Cassie? That is sentence enhancement. So if you found him guilty of that, and you said, right, if you found him guilty of that, and you actually said, yeah, I did it, and we find him guilty of also SMEX trafficking with the RICO, with Cassie and Jane, that means that when they sentence him for RICO, RICO can be 40 years to life. He's obviously going to get closer to life, okay? But there's more. There's more, there's more, there's more. Count 2. This is what they said they've already decided. Count 2. For SMEX trafficking of Cassie Ventura, did you find him guilty or not guilty? They have made the decision. Count 3. Mann Act transportation of Cassie Ventura. Do you find him guilty or not guilty? Mann Act, all right? Listen, Mann Act is when you move a prostitute across state lines or internationally, okay? Count 4. SMEX trafficking of Jane, right? Do you find him guilty or not guilty? Count 5, Mann Act transportation, that's moving a SMEX worker across either state lines or international. Do you find him guilty or not guilty? Now hear me out, okay? Because we are in the final thing. I just did a live of you guys saying I thought a verdict was going to come out down today. Why? Because Douglas Wigdor was in the courtroom. Why would he be in the courtroom listening to us pass notes unless he wanted to be there to make a statement on behalf of his client, whether he got guilty, his client is Cassie, whether Diddy was found guilty or not guilty, okay? And the whole family around, we saw Mama Combs looking distressed, talking to Brian Still and Westmoreland, and they were saying something, and then the kids all started rolling in between 11:30 and 1:30. And when the girls showed up, I said, oh yeah, they think something's about to come down the barrel, okay? Oddly enough, the jury tried to actually get ahead of that and say, listen, we decided everything else, but we can't decide RICO. Now hey, how are you? Here's the only thing that worries me, and just hear me out, right? It's the only thing that worries me. If they found him guilty of count 2, 3, 4, or 5, that is also guilty of RICO.
Right? It
so
should
I'm
be.
wondering how they found this man guilty of counts 2, 3, 4, and 5. But hey, have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm wondering how they found this man guilty of count 2, 3, or 5, but they didn't find enough for RICO. I believe the bribery is there. I believe the witness tampering is there. I don't know about forced labor. I believe the SMEX trafficking is one of it, and I believe the drug distribution is one of it. And also involving transportation for purposes of prostitution. I believe that's there too. Hold on, my thing's coming apart. I believe all that's there too. So how could they find him guilty of that, right? All right? How could they find him guilty of all that, but they didn't do it on RICO? There's a chance that they found him not guilty of those 4 out of the 5 charges. There's a chance, because how didn't you get the RICO? But then again, Diddy's demeanor, the people in his family and friends' demeanor. When you look at the jury, the way they came in so guilty, the way you look at the defense and the way they were acting like maybe it came out, or maybe it's distress. I don't know, but it was very, very, very weird, okay? It was very, very, very weird. Okay, so listen, this is a anonymous tip, if you will. Let me just get into this, right? Because it needs to actually be said, right? Somebody said, I believe the jurors who refused to change stance prior to the judge issuing a new charge is called the Allen charge. And the jurors who laughed or shook their heads along with Mark Agnifilo, they're the ones during Jane's testimony. We all knew Jane was going to well, maybe people thought that she was going to hurt the state on the RICO. Listen. So some people think that the jury is too pro-Diddy, right? They said the number one takeaway is if the jury comes back after the judge gives the Allen charge, then we want a deadlock jury. Now keep this in mind. What is an Allen charge? The Allen charge is when you tell the jury, listen, nobody, even if this goes to another jury, nobody is better suited, smarter, better, faster, better, prettier. Like, nobody is better than you to decide this case. So please don't think if you kick it down, oh, there's going to be people better. What is the Allen charge? It is meant to encourage them, right? It's meant to encourage them to kind of dig deep and get on their 12 angry men and start arguing back and forth about what's going on. That's what the Allen charge is supposed to do. So listen to this. The number one takeaway is if this jury comes back after the judge gives the Allen charge, and the Allen charge is like, basically, go back in there and decide. You guys are the best people to decide. If you guys don't decide it's going to be a problem, just go back in. They said if they come back after that, then you guys, listen to me. When you say your prayers for tonight, right? I like to give God a, if A, then B, but if B, then C, but if C, then D. I like to give God options just in case he's feeling generous, right? We want a deadlock jury. We want the mistrial to go to Donald Trump and get a freaking pardon, because they will say Diddy has been treated unfairly. Now, this is assuming that Donald Trump won't even give Diddy a pardon and wasn't just like, being Donald Trump, just talking, right? But that's where they're saying he was treated unfairly. The jurors came back and they said, no, we find him guilty. No, we find him not guilty. And then we were harassed and we were demeaned, and all these people said something. And now we were forced to change it to guilty, but we really don't think he's guilty, right? Listen, that's where they will have their chance for a friggin' party, okay? Again, just like Wolfette, me and my girl Wolfette was talking, she says, I don't understand, because if they found him guilty of 2 out of the 5 charges,
let's hope that it is that they found him guilty.
For 4 out of the 5 charges, then they found him guilty on all the predicate acts. Again, it's very odd, and I'm on pins and needles, but I'm telling you, Diddy was not acting like a man that had gotten not guilty on all those charges. Listen, the jury stayed to send another note, okay? They needed, again, the jury needs to realize that if you convicted already, okay, on just 2 of the 5, then you have a, then you have a predicate act for charge 1, okay? Again, maybe the feds needs to allow for a partial verdict, because even at max sentence, that is 20 years, and at Diddy's age, that is life, okay? Everybody is hung up on the RICO, okay? We need prayers tonight for those jurors to do the right thing. The ones that are stuck are not going to change their minds, so the judge needs to accept this partial verdict. Maybe, all right? Maybe the judge does need to accept their partial, maybe it does need to accept, and demand, listen, again, maybe the judge needs to demand that they continue with the Allen verdict. The Allen verdict is when they say, no, we can't decide, and they tell you, get back in there and decide, okay? Again, Wolfette would have sequestered themselves, right? I think if the jury was sequestered, it wouldn't have been like this. And I hope in the future the Diddy trial is sequestered. But
right,
at this point, is there anybody that can say, unless they're in the Appalachian Mountains, they can say, and even then I'm sure they know, that they can say that they don't know or they do know about the Diddy trial. You guys, this is huge. Again, let's get into this, right? So what actually happened? Hold on. Okay. Diddy seems stressed. There is tension. The kids got called in. All right. Now, when they came out and they said they decided on 4 out of the 5 charges, Diddy put his head down. He rubbed his temples. It was like a bomb went off. Trust me. Again, he could have been found not guilty, but the way the defense was acting, they acted like this was the worst thing that could ever happen in the world. Okay. Hold on a second. What else happened? 1 second. I'm trying to get to the part of my notes. Hold on. I know I have notes. Oh my gosh. What is the notes? Hold on, you guys. I have notes. Okay. Here we go. Okay. I found my notes, okay? Diddy's mom, look, these are my notes, okay? Stream of consciousness. Diddy's mom is in shock. Tinny put her arm around Diddy when it happened, okay? Driscoll and Shapiro looked super stand. Brian still looked worried. Diddy was rubbing his eyes and his head. All of a sudden, the way he had been sitting up high, he looked shrunken. His hands were kind of like not folded, but kind of in his lap, and he was just looking down at him. I think reality came. He was sitting there hunched. He looked smaller, okay? Both sides, when the judge asked, what do you want to do? Do you want to just take the partial verdict and move? Both sides said, absolutely not. Go back and figure it out, okay? They said it is, basically they felt like it's too late to call a mistrial. Mark Agnifilo was saying it's only been 1 day. They've only deliberated for 12 hours. Why in the world, okay, if they've only deliberated for 12 hours, why would we just let that go, okay? Now, the judge said, okay. Now, I will say one thing. When Janice Combs got up and she was like walking stoically out of the courtroom, it was almost like she was putting one foot in front of the other, okay? I really actually did feel sad, right? Because she's so sad. She's so sad, and she's so small, and she's so old, and she reminds me of my grandmother, right? Her friends rushed out to console her. Okay, they got out and they were walking, and she looked at that thing, how it's like, are you going to fade, okay? Maureen Comey looked super happy. She was talking to Mark Agnifilo, like, so anyway, like, what are you guys doing? Like, are you guys doing DoorDash, or do you want to go in? It's like, whatever. And I felt so bad for Janice Combs to be that old, to know that your son's going. But then a part of me said, no, you cannot be weak at a time like this, because who did this? My reporting didn't do this to Diddy. The prosecution didn't do this to Diddy. The witnesses didn't do this to Diddy. The only person that did this to Diddy was Diddy. And if Diddy hadn't laid hands and feet on Jane, and hey, oh, are you closing? Okay, we're gonna move over really quick, right? They're shutting us out. If Diddy hadn't laid hands and feet on Jane, if Diddy hadn't laid hands and feet on Jane, if Diddy hadn't, yeah? Oh, okay, sorry. Oh, it's Univision. You guys say hi. Oh, hi, I know you're from Univision. Hi. It's Univision. Oh, my God. Yes. Wow. Hola. Look at that. Hola. Yelena.
Yelena del Gordo y la Placa.
Oh, wow. Hola. Bye-bye. So anyway, listen. She's a legend. She's a legend. Thank you, baby. Don't worry. I need to get your opinion after everything's done. Okay. So anyway, listen. We're walking in the rain, but we are doing it. So, right? Oh, look. It's dry over here. I think. Yay. We found a dry space. See? When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. We found a dry space. Yay. Okay, so look. And I think it's out of the wind, too. Yay, we are in luck. Okay, so listen. So I literally had to check myself and be like, sorry, guys, they like kicked us out. They're closing up the courtroom. You know, I work later than everybody. So anyway, they were like, I thought about it, and I'm like, our reporting didn't do this. Praying for his downfall didn't do this. Because, baby, we have prayed for lots of evil to fall, and look at the way the world is. All this stuff didn't do it. Who did it? Diddy did it to himself. Diddy could have stopped. As a matter of fact, if he hadn't beaten Jane up and forced her to take that pill and said, you effing or whatever, and set up that freak off against her will, he might not have even been in this situation. He might not have been in this situation, okay? So, to make that clear, oh, I thought that was lightning. That's a flash. I thought it was lightning. Oh, look, people are coming out. There's Diddy's team coming out right there. That's Diddy's lawyers. That's Driscoll, Shapiro. And they have a poor intern carrying all the legal stuff. So Diddy's team is coming out, okay? Oh, we're in the perfect space to see all the lawyers come out. I'm going to keep it angled like that, so when they come out, we'll zoom in on them, all right? Listen, I'm going to keep it right here. We're seeing the teams walk out, so you guys will be the first to see them leave. If I see Maureen call me, I'm gonna be like, Maureen, I love you. Okay. So anyway, he did this to himself. So I'm gonna feel a bit sad. Okay. The family so sad. The girls run into the courtroom. It looks like they are holding in tears. Westmoreland came and was talking to the girls and trying to explain, because they are very young and it's so sad. But who did this to them? Their father. And I refuse to carry the burden, and we shouldn't either. No, because even when Jeffrey Dahmer was in the courtroom, somebody was probably crying over him. When Charles Manson was in the courtroom, there are people crying over him. No, you shouldn't have did it.
Ouch.
You want to blame someone? Blame yourself, right? Oddly enough, Misa Hilton was not there. I think she was serious when she said she was there to support Justin. Justin came in with his girlfriend, and I said, Justin has a girlfriend? That's weird. I didn't know that, but I guess, right? Diddy looked stressed. The Combs site looked like they were sitting at a funeral, okay? Westmoreland then went and put an arm around Diddy and was whispering in his ear so close, probably because she didn't want my nosy ass. And when I say me, I mean everybody in the galley, to know what she was saying. But she was bringing him in. It looked like she was whispering in his ear, doing what black women do. It looked like she was trying to uplift him and speak life into him, all right? The kids came in. They were looking so sad. The girls were whispering to themselves, but they looked like they were holding in tears. Christian had his head down in between his legs, just hanging his head down. Again, I wrote, Justin has a girlfriend? That's weird. Didn't know that. Anyway, again, they looked like they had little to no hope, because the jury had reached a verdict on 4 of the counts. Again, Mark Agnifilio was like, listen, I get that. So the judge, Judge Aaron was like, all right, so listen, what do you want to do? Do you want to do an Allen Act or an Allen Act? That is telling the jury, listen, I get what you're saying, but get your ass back in there and decide, because you don't get to just go, right? He asked Mark Agnifilio, how do you want to encourage the jury? Because you can't encourage the jury without put your finger on the scale. It has to be very hands off. You cannot influence a jury. That is grounds for appeal. So even when you give instructions, you need to be very, very careful about what you're instructing, right? And he was like, listen, Yana, I don't think, he's like, what's your instruction? And then he looked at Mark Agnifilio, suggested instruction. And he was like, this is no instruction. And Mark Agnifilio was like, listen, Yana, this jury has been deliberating for 12, maybe 10 hours, all right? I don't know. I put nothing extra because I don't know that they need anything extra. They are moving through this material incredibly fast. They are moving. They understand this. This is actually unprecedented, Your Honor. This is unheard of.
I need to know that those other verdicts are guilty.
This isn't like shorter trials where they can't decide on like most of the acts. This is an incredibly complicated case. And the fact that they've gotten through all this material in 12, maybe 14 hours, no. You guys, we have, listen, so then, what's his name? Judge Aaron was like, listen, well, what do you say about the jurors' note? The jurors said, we have jurors with unshakable opinions on every side, and they cannot agree on the RICO. Even though this is grounds for jury notification, if they do convict guilty on those 4 to 5 charges, but they don't convict on the RICO, when some of the RICO are the underlying for the 4 or 5 counts, unless they said that Diddy was not guilty of those 4 or 5 charges. But the way they walked out, some looked sad, some looked guilty, some looked like they had just sentenced a man to spend
maybe because they
2
thought
decades of his life in jail.
he was going to walk on all the charges.
The one juror that I was concerned about, because they always seem very, very pro-Diddy, Pollen, they always seem very, very pro-Diddy. They were even, like, they went like this to Mark Agnifilio when he was telling his jokes. And I was just like, They came in looking sad. They came in looking sad. They came in looking upset. They came in looking like, that's the way they came in looking. It makes me think they got him on some stuff, right? Now, he said, well, what do you say about, he said, listen, so the prosecution was like, how about this? How about we don't do the Allen charge, right? Well, that's what the defense said. Let's not do the Allen charge. And the prosecution reminded them that the prosecution said, listen, why don't we do something to remind the jury what deliberation entails, right? They both asked that they keep deliberating, right? And they said, They said, look at the lines 58 to 50, page 58 and 59 of the jury charge, and look at that and come back. Let's go into page 58 and 59 of the jury charge, right? Where is it? Listen. Hold on, guys. And don't forget, if they do not come to a conclusion, right? Hey, see ya! Bye-bye. So, bye. So listen. Also, if they do not come to a conclusion on count 1, they're going to retry Diddy only on count 1. So it's not over either way. But let's get into page 58 and 59 because I actually have the jury charge instructions with me. And if you guys will just stick with me, we will get to 58 and 59. 58 to 59, line 11 to line 2. And disregard line 17.
Shout out to Tisa.
Okay, here's what the judge decided to read back to the jury, okay? Because they said you're going back in there. Line 11. If your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate with a view to reaching an agreement. It is your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate with a view to reaching an agreement. Each of you must decide the case for himself or herself, but you should do so only after a consideration of the case with your fellow jurors, and you should not hesitate to change an opinion when convinced that it is erroneous. Discuss and weigh your respective opinions dispassionately, without regard to sympathy, without regard to prejudice or favor for either party, and follow my instructions on the law. When you are deliberating, all 12 jurors must be present in the jury room. If a juror is absent, you must stop deliberations. That's what he says every day, so we can disregard that. Again, your verdict must be unanimous, but you are not bound to surrender your honest convictions concerning the effect or weight of the evidence for the mere purpose of returning a verdict or solely because of the opinion of other jurors. Each of you must make your own decision about the proper outcome of this case based on your consideration of the evidence and your discussions with fellow jurors. No juror should surrender his or her conscientious beliefs for the purposes of returning a unanimous verdict. That is the instructions that they sent the verdict back. They sent the jury back with, okay? And they also said that if that doesn't work and they come back tomorrow and they're like, we still don't know what's going on, right? They said they're going to coax them to deliberation, all right? And Call Me says, if that doesn't work, we're going to give them this instruction that we gave in the Embanati case. There's no reason to believe that another jury will be better, more knowledgeable, smarter, or better equipped than you to decide this case. Get up and go decide the case. So, they give them the carrot and then they give them the stick, okay? Now, the defense jumped up and said, Your Honor, I think that goes too far. They don't need the government to coax them on. We're not at this point yet, right? Now, what he meant by that, and this is the only thing he had a good point, but that's because he thinks that if they come back with a verdict too soon, Diddy's going to be cooked, right? They are saying that, hold on, guys, let me just move over. They are saying that they think at this point, because they've only deliberated 12 hours, it's only been 1 day. Sorry, guys, my thing. It's only been 1 day that there is no reason why, okay? There is no reason why. Ugh, it stinks here. There is New York. Gosh, when it rains, right? They need Noah in the ark to get the city clean. I love the city, but they need Noah in the ark to get the city clean, right? Anyway, right? They're saying that with only 12 hours, go back in and decide. You haven't been in it for 3 days, 4 days, whatever. Now, Mark Agnifilo did say, because then the judge said, okay, listen, how about we say, this is what we're going to say to the jury now. Your way, Mark Agnifilo, and if it doesn't work, then we'll go to Comey's way, right? Because they said, here's the thing. I can tell the jury that if they don't reach their decision tomorrow, they're going to come back Monday, July 7th. But if they think they're close to their decision, then I'm going to open the courthouse on July 3rd. I know we were all like, no, but I was like, yes, open the courthouse, right? They said we're going to open the courthouse on July 3rd and we're going to have them deliberate. Mark Agnifilo was like, absolutely not. Because he says that he thinks that it is going to, Mark said, can I get a second? He was like, Yana, can we get a second? And then Shapiro, Mark, and Westmoreland were all huddling together. And they were like, right? And again, Shapiro is going to be the attorney that tries to appeal this and tries this appellate. That's why she's there. And that's why they are giving her so much weight now, because what they do now is going into the record for her future case. So they're giving her so much pathway because, you know, blah, 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 right? So then that's when they're like, Your Honor, Yana, we think you should ask the jury at the end of the day tomorrow. The jury wants to reach a verdict ASAP, and we don't want them to push them to reach the verdict for holiday weekend. Now, everybody in the courtroom was like, no, we don't want to do this. And I was like, I agree. Finally, me and Mark are agreeing. I 100% agree. I want the jury to actually really weigh in on this. Now, here's the thing. The prosecution seems to think that the jury is pushed into making a decision that they'll weigh in their favor. The defense seems to think that if the jury gets more time, that they'll weigh in Diddy's favor. Again, the way Diddy was acting, I'll be honest with you guys, right? The way Diddy was acting, the way jury body language, the way the defense was acting, the way the family was acting, the way everybody on the defense side was acting in every possible side, plus the jurors, it looked like they had convicted Diddy on at least 2 of the 5 counts, maybe Cassie. Even if you got away with Jane, you got convicted with Cassie. That Cassie stuff, I think, is at least 20 to 40 years, okay? Even if you did that, that means that there's no way that you wouldn't find that under RICO too, okay? However, there is a universe where they found him not guilty of 4 out of the 5 counts, and the only thing they can't decide on is if he's guilty on RICO. Judging by the way they were acting, I didn't see it. Judging by their body language, I don't see it. Judging by everything, I don't see it. But there is a universe, okay? There is a universe. Now,
okay, y'all, I'll be back.
Listen.